Boker Tov, everyone, and welcome back to our series on Sefer Bereishit. Today we're going to discuss Parashat Chayei Sara in the wider context of Sefer Bereishit, and hopefully this week's share will be a bit shorter than last week's, because the theme of last week required a little extra time. Today the topics will be a bit shorter. Before we go to the wider theme, I want to point out something in the beginning of Parashat Chayei Sara about Avraham buying the burial plot in Marat HaMachpelah. In general, the overall approach is whenever there's something that our ancestors did, we're always the good guys, and anyone who's not Jewish is always the bad guy. And we like to point out that it seems like Ephron and the people in Hebron are sort of trying to rip off Avraham Avinu in a business deal. I want to suggest a different approach here. And again, I'm not deciding which approach is right or correct, but it's a good exercise, what's called the Dan Lechavschut, to try to see the positive side in other people. In other words, it's not so terrible when you disagree with somebody, even though you disagree and they might be wrong and you might be right, but the ability to see the other side and train yourself to look at the opinions of the other side and understand where they're coming from can also help you resolve the argument and understand the other side much better. Again, that's a bit of, I think, an approach which I think would be very helpful today. So I'd like to say quite often, there's always good reasons for sinat chinam. There's always a good basis or good reason for baseless hatred. And we have to learn how to get over that by learning those who disagree with us, even though we're sure they're wrong, at least try to understand why they think they're right and not see the other opinion as an enemy, but rather as a partner, and learn to work together, even though we disagree, and argue maturely, and try to look what common goal we have and how we can work together, even though we disagree on how to accomplish our goal. Okay. With that in mind, I want to look at the story of Avram looking to buy a burial plot. What I want to distinguish between is between a burial spot, S-P-O-T, and a burial plot, P-L-O-T. What do I mean? When Avram is faced with the problem, he needs a place to bury Sara, his wife. Remember, they're new in the country. They don't have the family burial place. He's living in the area of Hebron. Everyone there knows him. And the people of Hebron think that he needs a burial spot. Meaning what? Unfortunately, his wife died. She needs to be buried somewhere. And what do they say? Anywhere you want. No one in our community will hold you back from burying your wife. You take any burial area, everyone will give you a spot to bury your wife, no problem. Now, what are they assuming? Avram is a nomadic person. He's here today, gone tomorrow. He has no family history here in the country. And therefore, if we give him a burial spot, okay, within a couple years he'll be gone and people forget about it. Now, when Avram comes and tells him, I don't want a burial spot, again, that they'll give him for free. Anywhere you want, no problem. Avram returns and says, no, I want a burial plot. In other words, I want to buy a piece of land in the area of Elonei Mamre, in the area of Hebron, because I want to come back here again. I want to make this a family burial plot because my destiny and my future is going to be in this land for hundreds and maybe thousands of years. And Avram is looking to the future. Now, if you want to buy a burial plot already, that's going to be a piece of land, that's going to be real estate, then we need to have an official transaction. And Avram is interested in paying the full price because it's so important to him that everyone knows that this piece of land belongs to him. And that way that burial plot will be there for the future. And indeed that happens, and that's going to be emphasized over and over again in Chumash, all the way at the end of Sefer Bereishit, when the brothers go to bury Yaakov. Chumash goes out of its way to tell us where was Yaakov buried, in the same burial plot that Avram brought from Bereishit. And by Avram paying full price and making a big deal about it, that ensured that no one would take that land, and that would remain our family burial plot forever. And in fact, to this day, Marat HaMachpelah, the same place where Avram buried Sara and our ancestors are buried. Luckily, Herod, in the Second Temple period, built a massive structure around it that are all familiar with when those who go to visit Marat HaMachpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs. So again, I just wanted to begin to share with an example of understanding that story in a more positive way. It's not a crooked business deal between the people trying to rip off Avraham Avinu. Rather, Avraham Avinu has a different understanding of what he wants to do. The local people think he wants a burial spot, and Avraham claims, I want a burial plot. And because of that, he wants to pay full price, and they offer him full price, and I can read the entire story without anyone being a good guy or a bad guy. Avram has simply a different vision of what's going on. The people in Hebron are just living day to day, no long-term vision of starting a nation, and a vision being starting a nation that have an impact on mankind. And Avram has a long destiny because of God's promises to him. Therefore, it's important to him that we have a spot in the land of Israel where our ancestors will be buried, and we have the real estate that belongs to us, and we can go back there to bury the dead as Jewish history continues. The next story in Sefer, in Parashat Chayei Sara, Parashat Daled, is a famous story of Avram sending his servant Eliezer to go get a wife for Yitzchak in the house of Lavan. In the family's area of Haran, to the family of Terach, and ultimately Rivka will be chosen. As I'm sure everyone notices in that story, even though everyone knows it's Eliezer, we're assuming it's Eliezer, he's never called Eliezer. Instead, his name is always Eved Avraham. The Eved, or Eved Avraham, he says Eved Avraham Anochi. Chumash refers to him as the Eved. I want to suggest the reason why Chumash does that. Number one, why is there so much detail in this story? And why is Chumash going out of its way to call Eliezer Eved Avraham? It could be, again, this might be a bit midrashic, but if I want to tie this to the underlying theme of Chumash, there's a mega theme in Chumash that we're chosen to serve God. If you remember from our prayer services, I'll take Hallel on Rosh Chodesh and every Yom Tov. Hallelujah, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, Yalu et Shem Hashem. In our early classes, we talked about the theme of God's name and God's reputation. The way we make God's reputation great is by how we talk and how we act. Again, by doing mishpat and tzedakah, doing justice and righteousness as a nation, as a people, as a community. Again, we do that as individuals, as a community, and ideally as a people, as a nation. And through that, we'll have an impact on others. That's the underlying purpose of God choosing a nation forever. That's our ultimate goal, and that's how we have an impact and bring blessing to other nations. But being dedicated to that goal and identifying with your goal, that's the concept of being an Eved. In Hebrew, the word Eved can mean three different things. Eved can mean a slave who's forced to do that labor, like Avadei Mayinu, the Pharaoh b'Mitzrayim. Our slavery in Egypt was forced labor. We didn't do it because we want to. We had no choice. We were oppressed by the Egyptians, and it was forced labor. That's one type of Eved, meaning a slave. There's another Eved who gets paid for his job. He's not forced to work, but he does it because he's getting paid. But if he wasn't getting paid, he wouldn't think of doing the job. And then there's an Eved who's a type of minister in the government or a high-ranking official who loves his job, who identifies with his job. Doesn't want to be the boss, he wants to be working for the boss. Eliezer doesn't want to be Avraham Avinu, he wants to be Eved Avraham. As he says, Eved Avraham Anochi. He's so proud to be the servant of Avraham. And how does he get his job done? Of course he's going to get paid. But his goal is to be in the service of Avraham Avinu. That's his goal in life. And when Avraham gives him a job to do, he'll do that job. Sometimes he'll have to improvise. In other words, he's going to follow the rule book. He's going to follow the strategy, the overall approach that Avraham is telling him to do. But he might have to change his tactics if situations come up. In other words, as we see in the story, when things get difficult, Eliezer or Eved Avraham will have to improvise, but he'll stick to his goal because he's dedicated to do what Avraham wants. And again, he's not going to be a robot. He's going to be a thinking servant of Avraham, always sticking to the goal of accomplishing what he thinks Avraham wants him to do. Who else is called an Eved like this in Chumash? In the very end of Chumash, remember, Vayomet Moshe Eved Hashem. I think the word epitaph is in English, that Moshe Rabbeinu receives. Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Our great leader, the one who gives us the Torah, he's known as Eved Hashem. That's not a slave, that's not a regular servant. That's a high-ranking minister, someone who's dedicating his entire life to serving God. If you remember the story of the Exodus, there's Avadim, we're Avadim to Paro, but in that story there's Avdei Paro. Throughout the story of the Exodus, remember, Vaymu Avdei Paro Elav Ad Matei Zed Mokesh in the beginning of Parashat Bo, that's Pharaoh's cabinet ministers. Right? The people running the government in Egypt, Avdei Paro, they're all through the story of the Exodus. You'll pay attention to it later when you study Sefer Shemot. Pharaoh's cabinet ministers, the people making decisions, helping Pharaoh run the country, they're also called Avadim. So an Eved is someone who can be also someone, a high-ranking person in the service of God, dedicated to his job. And therefore, it's our job to be Avdei Hashem. We say that all through davening, don't we? Again, in Hallel, Hallelujah, Avdei Hashem, Yahalu et Shem Hashem. I'll give you another example. In Yom Tov davening, we begin with Ata b'chartanu mikol ha'amim. Every Yom Tov davening begins with the same introduction. We thank God for choosing us, of loving us through love. You chose us to serve you. You gave us the Torah. You gave us mitzvot. And then we say, V'keraftanu malkeinu la'avodotecha. You brought us closer in order to serve you. V'shimcha gadol aleinu karata. Those two themes of Sefer Bereishit were chosen to serve God. And the goal of our serving God is to make God's name great, to make his reputation great by how we act and how we talk. And the way we act is by doing tzedek u'mishpat. And the way we talk is how we daven and pray and live our lives always talking about God and thanking God for all the blessings he gives us and recognizing our purpose. That goal to be an Eved Hashem is a mega theme throughout the entire Torah. And therefore it could be that this lengthy discussion of how Eliezer, again, who we refer to as Eliezer, but Chumash says is Eved Avraham, by calling him Eved Avraham over and over again and seeing his dedication to his job, that might be a model that we learn from what it means to be an Eved. I'll bring one last example from Psukei Zimra. We begin Hodu L'Shem Kiru Bishmo. Remember, we begin Psukei Zimra with that phrase from Tilim Kufei. Also, we read the version from Divrei Yamim, chapter 16. We're obligated to praise God and call out in his name, like Avraham Avinu did. Hodu Lo Zamru Lo Sich B'chon Niflotav, etc. Who's being commanded? Zera Yisrael Avdo B'nei Yaakov B'chirav. Or in the Tilim it says Zera Avraham Avdo. Basically, we're chosen to be servants of God as an Eved, but not an Eved like a slave, and not an Eved just to get reward. If you remember Pirkei Avot, don't be like servants, autiu kavadim, who serve the master to receive schar. We should be those type of servants who serve our master, who are serving God, and we do it because it's the right thing to do. We identify with our job. We love doing our job. Of course, it can't hurt to get schar, to have a stipend, to get rewarded, but our goal is not the reward. Our goal is the service. And that idea of being an Eved Hashem might be, I'm suggesting, one of the underlying reasons why Chumash goes into so much detail in the story of Eliezer and how he behaves. And that can be a model for us to understand how we should be Avdei Hashem in our day-to-day life. Again, relating that story to the mega theme of the Torah. The final short topic I want to talk about is at the end of the Parsha, in Perek Chayei, we find Elu Todot Yishmael. And just by chance, we follow not only the Toledot of Avraham Avinu, but also of Yishmael, and we get his genealogy. Okay. And in fact, we find later on, he has 12 sons that are counted, and they all become princes. And there seems to be a pattern in Avram's family of having 12 children. Remember, Yaakov will have 12 tribes ultimately. We'll see Esav also having 12. And again, what's the meaning of that 12? That we'll have to talk about later in the book when we talk about the 12 tribes. But there's something going on with 12. But the big topic in Sefer Bereishit is this word Toledot. Now, we discussed this briefly before, but the phrase Toledot gives a framework for the entire book. But there must be something bigger going on. In other words, from a technical point of view, Toledot give a framework to the book, the entire book. Because first, God makes from nothing, Shemaim va'aretz. Remember the word bara, out of nothing, God creates Shemaim and Aretz, so basically what we call nature. Chapter 2 begins with Elu Toldot HaShemaim va'aretz. This is the result, or the offspring of heaven and earth, which is the story of God making man. And then in chapter 5, we have Toldot of the Sefer Toldot HaAdam. We have the genealogies of Adam. Adam gives birth again to Shet, and Shet to Enosh, etc., until we get to Lemech and Noach. And Noach has 3 sons. And we talked about chapter 5, the key Toledot in the universal section, where we have 10 generations from Adam to Noach, Noach with 3 sons, and that leads to the flood story and the recreation story after the flood. And then Todot B'nai Noach, Noach's 3 sons, turning to the 70 nations, followed by the story of the Tower of Babel. And then in contrast to those 10 generations from Adam to Noach, and Noach's 3 sons, leading to 70 nations, and the universal section of Sefer Bereishit, the particular section of Sefer Bereishit begins in chapter 11 with Elu Todot Shem, Shem to Terach, and Terach has three sons, Avram, Nahor, and Haran. And then the rest of Sefer Bereishit will follow the Toldot of Terach that we saw at the end of Parashat Noach. And that was setting up the parallel between the universal section and the particular section, again, in God's choosing a nation to have an impact. That specific nation of Avraham Avinu will have an impact, hopefully, and bring blessing to other nations by doing justice and righteousness, as we talked about last week. Now, what's really surprising is that we don't find Toldot Avraham. What do we find? We have Toldot Shem to Terach, and then Elu Toldot Terach. Terach has three sons, Avram, Haran, and Nahor. We also saw in the end of Parashat Vayera last week, we had the Toldot of Nahor. Remember, Nahor had 8 sons from his wife and 4 sons from his Pilegesh. We read that in Rosh Hashanah. Again, a total of 12, including Rivka, his granddaughter from Betuel. Betuel Yeladet Rivka. So we follow the Toldot of Nahor. Okay? We follow the Toldot of Haran because Haran died but left Lot, his only son, and Yitzchak again, and Milcah. Milcah married Nahor, Yitzchak Chazal says Sara, but we follow Haran genealogy through Lot. Lot has 2 sons, Moab and Ammon. And the story of Lot's genealogy we also have. And therefore, if I'm looking for the Toldot of Avraham, I'm basically finding them included within the Toldot of Terach. Like the last time we have Elu Toldot was Elu Toldot Terach. Elu Toldot Terach was technically Avram, Haran, and Nahor. And up until Parashat Toldot, of Toldot Yitzchak, will be next week's Parasha, we find the Toldot of Terach. The story of Avram Avinu, the story of Haran, leading to Lot, Ammon, and Moab, the story of Nahor, leading to his 8 sons and 4 from the Pilegesh, total of 12, including Betuel and his daughter Rivka, who's going to marry, of course, Yitzchak. But again, for some reason, we never have a specific Elu Toldot Avram. Where are we going to find it? With Elu Toldot Yitzchak, Elu Toldot Yitzchak, Avram Holidet Yitzchak. So we're sort of making up for it in the introduction to Toldot Yitzchak, which will be right after Toldot Ishmael. Now, there could be a very technical reason why there's no Toldot Avram itself, because when Avram's born, his name is Avram, and Avram has no children until his name is changed from Avram to Avraham, and then he gives birth to Yitzchak. So that might be the technical reason for it. Or it could be Avram is unique, because Avram is a transition from the universal to the particular. So it could be because of the special nature of Avram being an Av Hamon Goyim, it could be that Chumash purposely skips a verse, Elu Toldot Avram, because in many ways, Avram is universal, and I don't want to limit him to one group of people, but Avram's legacy will go to Yitzchak, and therefore next week we're going to find Elu Toldot Yitzchak, Avram Holidet Yitzchak. Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Holidet Yitzchak. You could go back and highlight that. Again, I don't have a convincing answer for that, but it's definitely a phenomenon going on. But afterwards, we're going to find Toldot Yitzchak, the story of Yaakov and Esav, we'll talk about next week, followed by Toldot Esav, and again, he'll have 12 Nisaim as well. And then we're going to have Toldot Yaakov and the story of the 12 tribes. And that will take us to the end of Sefer Bereishit. So the word, again, Toldot, is going to build an overall structure for Sefer Bereishit. It's going to help develop the theme of Bereishit. But what's interesting is that we never have Toldot Avram specifically because of the special nature of Avram Avinu. But technically speaking, all the Toldot of Avram are included in the framework of Toldot Nahor. And very similar to, remember, we had 10 generations from Adam to Noach, Noach's 3 sons. And then we have Toldot B'nai Noach, leading to the 70 nations. In a similar manner, we had Toldot Shem to Terach, Terach's 3 sons. Then following Toldot B'nai Terach, Avram, Nahor, and Haran. And those stories taking us to the end of Parashat Chayei Sara. And then continuing now next week in Parashat Toldot with Yitzchak, which we'll continue with next week. Everyone should have a wonderful day.